I woke up mid-sentence, my own voice pushing through slides I had built over 3 years, and for one perfect minute, I was winning. The Vail Trust boardroom smelled like fresh coffee and cold air conditioning. 12 people sat around a table shaped like an eye, and every one of them was watching me the way people watch someone who is finally about to get what she deserves. I had the Providence chain laid out clean, piece by piece, painting for Naples to New York without a single gap. This deal would close by Friday. This deal would make me head of authentication, a title I had earned in overtime, hours nobody saw, and drafts nobody thanked me for. Then the chairman flipped a page I had never seen before. It was an authentication letter. My letter. My name typed at the bottom, my digital signature stamped in the corner, dated 2 weeks earlier. I had never written it. I had never signed it. But there it was, sitting in my own file, looking exactly like something I would have made. The room turned on me like a wave breaking. Voices stacked on top of each other. My supervisor, Callum, was the loudest, already halfway out of his chair, saying words like fraud and immediate termination and get her badge before anyone had asked him to. Callum had built half his last year's bonus on research I had done alone at midnight. And now he was the first person calling for my head, like distance from me was the only thing that could save him. Security was already being paged. I felt my own name become a rumor in real time, right there in the room, before I had said a single word in my own defense. That is the part nobody tells you about being falsely accused. It is not the accusation itself that breaks you first. It is how fast a room decides who you are without asking you anything at all. If you have ever had a room decide who you were before you got the chance to speak, I want you to hit subscribe right now, because Naomi was about to find out exactly who was actually in her corner, and it was not who she expected. Damian Vail had not said a word this entire meeting. He owned the collection. He owned, technically, half the reason any of us were in that room. He sat at the head of the table with his jacket still buttoned, unreadable, the kind of still that made other people talk faster just to fill the silence. When he finally stood, the room went quiet on its own, the way a classroom goes quiet when the strictest teacher walks in. He said one sentence. Every document in that file gets re-audited before anyone touches her employment. And until it's done, she doesn't speak to a single man in this building without me present. Nobody argued. Nobody dared. It should have felt like rescue. Instead, it landed somewhere stranger, somewhere between relief and a leash tightening around my wrist. He hadn't asked if I wanted saving. He hadn't asked me anything at all. He had simply decided out loud, in front of everyone, that no one else got to decide my fate but him. I sat there with my heart slamming and my hands flat on the table, and I honestly could not tell if I had just been protected or just been claimed. 2 hours later, I was standing in his office, and it smelled like nothing at all, which somehow felt more intimidating than any cologne could have. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk with almost nothing on it, and Damien standing with his back to the glass like he needed the whole city behind him to have this conversation. He didn't waste time on comfort. He told me the forged letter didn't just threaten my job. It put a hole straight through the provenance of his family's entire trust, which meant federal audit exposure, which meant this was never really about protecting me at all. It was about protecting the thing he actually cared about, and I just happened to be standing in the blast radius. I respected that more than I expected to. He wasn't dressing it up as chivalry. He was telling me the truth, blunt and cold, and somehow that felt safer than kindness would have. Then he explained the ban properly. No male staff could contact me one-on-one until the forensic review cleared me. Official protocol, evidence chain protection, nothing personal, he said. I told him I didn't need a man's name stapled to my innocence for people to believe I was innocent. I told him I had survived plenty of rooms without anyone standing over my shoulder, and I could survive this one too. He didn't argue back. He just watched me like he was recalculating something. Would you have trusted the protection, or would you have fought the leash the way I did? Tell me in the comments, because I needed to know if I was the only one who couldn't just say thank you and sit down quietly. Then he said something I didn't expect. The rule applies to him too. He wouldn't be alone with me either. Not until this was resolved, so it could never look like he'd built the whole thing just to isolate me for himself. That single sentence did more to earn my trust than any grand gesture could have. He wasn't just controlling my access. He He was limiting his own. For the first time in 3 years working in that building, somebody hadn't just talked over me. He had let me win the argument, and then matched the terms against himself too. By the end of the week, the whole office knew about the ban, and the story had already grown teeth. Some people whispered that Damien was marking territory. Others said I must have slept my way into his protection, because why else would a man like him put his own name on the line for an assistant? Callum found me anyway, breaking the rule within 4 days. He didn't corner me in a threatening way. If anything, he looked scared, glancing at the hallway twice before he even opened his mouth. He said he was just checking on me, just looking out for me. And then, quieter, he told me to stop asking who benefited from the forgery. Just stop digging, he said. Let the review handle it. That was the first crack in the wall. Someone specific wanted this investigation to stall, and Callum knew who. I reported the contact to Damien, half expecting him to be furious that someone had broken his rule within a week. Instead, he went unervingly calm, more interested in exactly what Callum had said than the fact that he'd said it all. If you caught that too, that Callum wasn't threatening me, he was warning me, hit that like button right now, because someone inside that building was already terrified, and it wasn't me he was scared of. Damien started quietly pulling every financial file that had crossed Callum's desk over the past year. He didn't tell me why yet. He just said trust takes time, and moved on like the conversation was already closed. I sat with that a long time. Callum hadn't looked afraid of losing his job. He had looked afraid of a person, and it wasn't me, and it wasn't Damien. 2 weeks in, my bank sent me an alert I didn't understand until I read it 3 times. My account had been frozen, flagged for suspicious activity, tied to an anonymous tip claiming I'd received undisclosed payments connected to the forged letter. Not true, not even close to true, but true enough on paper to lock me out of my own money for up to 2 weeks while it got reviewed, and rent was due in 4 days. I didn't tell Damien right away. I told myself I could fix it myself, called the bank's dispute line 4 separate times, got 4 separate people reading from the same useless script, none of them caring that an innocent woman was about to miss rent because someone had decided to weaponize a system that doesn't ask questions before it punishes you. If you know somebody who's ever been punished by a system before they even got the chance to explain themselves, send them this story right now, because I was about to learn how far that kind of cruelty could reach. Damien found out anyway, not from me, but from his own security team. The anonymous tip had come from an internal IP address inside Arden House itself. Whoever had framed me financially was the same person who had forged the letter in the first place, and they had access to our network. This wasn't random anymore. This was someone with keys. He didn't offer to just pay it off. I braced for that, honestly, expected him to hand me a check and call it solved. He didn't. He put his own forensic accountant on unfreezing the account through the actual legal channel, treating it as evidence instead of charity, insisting we do it the right way, even though the right way was slower. It worked. 3 days later, my account was clear, and it was clear because he had let me fight it on my own terms instead of erasing the fight for me. He hadn't paid to make my problem disappear. He had made sure my problem got exactly what it deserved, a fight it couldn't win. Something shifted after that, quiet and slow, nothing dramatic. A few nights later, we were both still in the office long after everyone else had gone home, both working the same case files, neither of us talking about the case at all. I caught myself humming off key while I cataloged documents. He caught himself actually laughing, really laughing, for the first time since I'd known him, at something small and stupid I said about a painting that looked like it was frowning at us. He brought me coffee at some point, my exact order, the one I'd never told him. When I asked how he knew, he said he'd noticed a cup on my desk 3 weeks running, long before any of this started. I called him out for it, told him he'd apparently been noticing me a long time before he ever had a reason to protect me. He didn't deny it. He admitted, carefully, guardedly, that he had pushed the promotion committee 2 years ago to actually read my research, and they'd overruled him, and he'd regretted not pushing harder ever since. This is the version of him nobody at Arden House gets to see, so stay through to the next part with me, because I promise you it doesn't last. For a moment, just a few seconds, the distance between us disappeared. Neither of us moved to close it, exactly, but neither of us moved away either. It felt like standing at the edge of something neither of us had agreed to yet. Then his phone lit up on the desk, and the name on the screen ended the moment before either of us could turn it into something we couldn't take back. The name was tied to the forged letter. His security team had traced a decade of quietly skimmed consignment fees to an offshore account, buried under 3 layers of shell companies. And at the bottom of that trail was Preston, Damien's chief operating officer, his closest friend since university, the man who had helped build half of Arden House's finance division, standing right beside him. I hadn't been the target at all. I had been cover. Preston needed a scandal loud enough to justify sealing the archive for investigation, buying himself time to erase 10 years of theft before Damien's routine audit caught it. Damien didn't believe it at first. Not performing disbelief, genuinely refusing it, the way you refuse something that would mean rebuilding your whole understanding of a person you trusted completely. Comment below if you've ever had to accept that the person hurting you wasn't a stranger at all. It was somebody you trusted for years, because that is exactly what Damien was staring down. I didn't feel vindicated watching him go quiet like that. I felt the weight land on him instead of me. Watched something in his face go still in a way that scared me more than his anger ever could have. For once I wasn't the one who needed steadying. He was. And Preston had one more card left to play before the DA's office opened Monday morning, and he knew exactly how little time that gave him. Preston moved fast once he realized we were closing in. He leaked a story to a business gossip outlet, technically true in every sentence, devastating in what it implied. Not a story about my supposed fraud. A story about Damien, an executive twisting company policy to shield a woman he was sleeping with from consequences, using his own ban as evidence of obsession dressed up as protection. It landed 2 days before a major shareholder vote. Board members who had backed Damien for years started quietly stepping back, the way people do when a story gets loud enough to be inconvenient. This is the chapter where the whole company turns on him for protecting me. So subscribe right now if you don't want to miss how he chose to answer for it. I offered to resign publicly, to remove myself from the story entirely, take the hit so his name could stay clean. It felt like the only decent thing left to do. He refused, flatly, immediately, in a way that told me this wasn't really about me at all anymore. He told me his father had lost everything once to a boardroom smear he couldn't disprove fast enough. Watched his life's work get stripped away by a story instead of a fact. Damien had spent every year since swearing he would never again let someone he could protect get sacrificed for the sake of optics. That was the truth of him, finally. Not obsession, not possession. A promise he'd made to a version of himself that had watched his father broken and could do nothing about it. He wasn't protecting his name. He was refusing to become the man who let it happen twice. Something in me changed hearing that. My guilt turned into something sharper, something closer to loyalty. I stopped trying to protect him by disappearing and started fighting to stay exactly where I was. We worked side by side after that, really side by side, not protector and protected. I used my own expertise, the thing I actually knew better than anyone in that building, and proved the forged letters paper stock and printing timeline didn't exist yet on the dates Preston had building access. It closed the last gap in the case, and it was mine. Not his money, not his name. Mine. She's the one who cracked the case wide open, so hit that like button right now if you saw that coming before the board ever did. We called an emergency shareholder session. Preston knew the walls were closing. He didn't come at me with threats this time, nothing that obvious. He cornered me alone in the locked archive room while I finished the last of the paper analysis, and he talked to me instead, quiet, almost gentle, almost believable. He said Damien would drop me the second the scandal cooled off, that I was a liability being managed, not a woman anyone actually wanted. It nearly worked, not because I believed Preston exactly, but because some old, tired part of me had been waiting my whole life for someone to confirm I was disposable, and for one terrible minute, I almost let him. Preston hadn't raised a hand against me. He hadn't needed to. He'd found the one door inside me that fear could never open, and doubt walked right through it instead. I sat with that fear for a long time after he left, shaking in a room full of paper and old ink, questioning every single thing Damien had ever said to me. Then Preston came back, later that same night, this time for the evidence itself. He tried to take the paper analysis straight out of the archive before the shareholder session could use it. I stood between him and the door. I didn't scream. I didn't wait for anyone to save me. I called building security myself, calm, using the exact protocol Damien's team had taught me weeks earlier, and I held the door until they arrived. She didn't wait to be rescued, so share this with somebody who needs reminding that they can be their own rescue too, because that's exactly what I had to become. Damien arrived minutes later, once it was already handled. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he apologized for the doubt Preston had planted, for not seeing it sooner, for letting me carry the weight of both of us for far too long. He hadn't come to save me. He had come to find out that I hadn't needed him to. The shareholder session happened 2 days later. Preston was exposed with the evidence I had built myself, arrested quietly afterward. No scene, no spectacle, just the slow, ordinary collapse of a decade built on theft. Damien stood in front of the board and credited me by name, not for my loyalty, not for what I'd survived, but for my work, the actual paper analysis, the actual expertise that had cracked the case wide open. If you think I earned that promotion twice over, tell me what you would have done in Preston's position. Comment it below before we get to the ending, because I still think about how close it all came to going a different way. The board reinstated me on the spot and voted, unanimously, to make it permanent. Head of authentication. My name on the record for the work I had actually done. Damien lifted the ban himself, publicly, almost like a joke between us, saying it wasn't necessary anymore because I had already proven exactly whose word carried weight in that building. Mine. Weeks later, I walked into a board meeting as the newly appointed head of authentication. Damien was there too, seated among the other board members, not beside me, not hovering, deliberately giving me the room to stand there on my own. For the first time in the whole story, I didn't need anyone's protection to be believed. I just needed to be right, and I was. He hadn't banned every man in that building from talking to me to keep me his. He had done it to buy me the time, to prove I never needed anyone's permission to be believed at all. If this story hit you the way it hit me while I lived it, subscribe now because there's another one coming about a woman who gets to save herself with the receipts, not just the romance, and I think you're going to want to see how that one ends too.